Good evening. Good evening, welcome. My name is Sarah Lipton. I am the director here at the Montpelier Senior Activity Center. And as a fellow member of the queer community, I'm so happy that we have the Rainbow Umbrella Group of Central Vermont. Rainbow Umbrella Group of Central Vermont, not to be mistaken as anything other than. And and I'm so thrilled that we have four amazing poets. We did this, what, 2 weeks ago? And it was wonderful. And so we're so happy to be here again. We, of course, wish we had a full house, but we have a warm house. So that's a good thing. And I'm really delighted to introduce our friend Linda, who is, when I asked her what I should say, she said to introduce her as the cutest thing. So sorry. Besides that, she is also a writer, a poet, an author, a speaker, a storyteller, and also the co-founder of the Rainbow Umbrella Central Vermont Group. Rainbow Umbrella Group of Central Vermont. There we go. And is going to introduce our poets this evening.
Well, hi, everybody. Our first reader is going to be Buffy. And I'm going to read the bio, which is growing up around the hills and lakes of New Jersey, west of New York City. Buffy has since lived as a queer man in cities and rural towns throughout the United States. His poems have been published by Main Street Rag and New Feathers Anthology, among others. His poem, The Beauty Before Us, was the winner of the 2022 Marian Gleason Award, presented by the Vermont Society, the Poetry Society of Vermont. Untangling the Knots, his chapbook of how-to poems, will be published by Kelsey Books in December of 2022. So that's coming right up. Currently, he resides in Vermont Green Mountains with his four-legged companion, Bodhi. His work can be viewed at www.buffy, and is it poetry.com. So, welcome, Buffy. Using this only because if you're standing up to the mic and other people have been there, you know, it might be good to, although this is not going to win. Just make sure that you don't hit something. Okay.
Thank you, Linda. So I'm going to begin with love and end with love. This one's called What Love Is Never, and it was published by Dissonance magazine in 2021. Love should never come to endless negotiation, making beautiful arrangements of practicalities as if they were flowers in an ugly vase, or discussing the practicality of arrangements like love was approaching the end of its life and we needed to choose its casket. Love should never end in a brewing swill of sorrow, drowning the history of tears with its contents, as if the melancholy had no end, or emptying the container of joy to the ground like the elixir were suddenly so bitter, a single sip of poison. This one's called The Beauty Before Us, and this was the one that won the Marian Gleason Award this year. We must fall in love with beastly things, lascivious, brash, and pithy things, bend our knee in grace of circumstance, braid misgivings and tales of radiance, forgiveness received, offenses softened, surrender to expanding beauty, engendering bonds, give birth, belonging, falling down before our calling, to see the beauty in all the living, resting, breathing, brave in grieving. This one's called The Prayers, published in New Feathers Anthology, and it's about poets. I was struck at a reading recently that almost all the readers said that they pray in some way, and they meditate, or they have a spiritual practice, and I thought that was really interesting. The prayers. These are the honey makers, the maple sap tappers, the pollen gatherers, the elixirs healing the future from the spirits of the past, unleashing beasts who make right the wrongs, the saviors of the waters, the elders of the vineyards, turning failing limbs to wings, blacksmiths who shape hard metals into words, uncoiling spells to rest on winds and spiral to the sky. These are the doers, the shakers, the spinners, the unripe berries who will delight our tongues, who speak the truth before it is so, and unjam the rivers to free the flow. They are the fish that run upwards, then come down to feed the people when the best of times are beaten. I wrote this one after a plant spirit medicine conference in the east of Santa Cruz in California. We were at a Buddhist retreat center called Buddha's Garden. In the silent area, we hear only the chatter of plants, the numerous assertions of the tall blades of wild grass, the wisps of cloud-like remarks in the vernacular of the pearly everlasting, soaring pontifications of giant and soothing redwoods, even sly musings posed by poisoned hemlock. Here we are cautioned by the Buddha to suspend our tongues, suppress ancient urges to poison true joy with the scourge of stolen words, like darts from a blowgun called mind, which kills for sport while stars silently recite mantras and unite the inner trinity into one. Like messages from the full moon up there, but that we cannot yet see, we feel these utterances. And rather than claiming his domain of creative property, Buddha laughs in our hearts as we lay our ears to the ground, to hear and feel against our auditory ossicles the great wisdom of the ages. And we have always done this. This is a poem of lost love. Remembering last year at Hood Canal. This time last year, we were paddling together in deep roiling waters in Hood Canal, checking crab traps for that catch to feed the joyful celebration of our mother, for she had become my mother too. We paddled well, the two of us, a left and a right. Too much on the left, a stroke or two on the right. This was how we went through life, on course for a future I thought I knew, to a point farther away than it first had appeared. That night, we had crab and laughed and drank together. Then we stood in the dark in the ocean breeze. The sailor in my blood knew we'd been blown off course, our love irrevocably lost overboard, sent to the bottom along with the weight of empty words. Sometimes I stand on this different shore, see him out on the boat fading into beyond. Every day a little farther, less and less I know him, and less I remember. This last one in a similar vein. The things I can now see without you. I saw an indigo bunting today and thought of you, of how I know birds make you happy, and how I wished happiness came as easily to me. How life thrives when we see things we usually fail to see. like impossibly blue birds or those heart gems, the people I would be lesser for not having known, that my shirt was on inside out, my collar folded in, or the delightful strangeness of euphorbia, eagles perched on highway posts, flowers growing out of rocks. Yes, today I saw this bird, and I had to let you know I'm learning to notice things, though I no longer share it all with you. Thank you.
Now we're gonna welcome Carol Potter. This is her sixth book of poems. What happens next is anyone's guess won the 2021 Pacific Coast Series in Poetry from Beyond the Road. Book number 5, Some Slow Bees, won the Field Poetry Prize from Oberlin College Press. Other awards include a creation grant from the Vermont Arts Council, 2019, the 1998 Cleveland State Poetry Center Award for her book, The Short History of Pets, and Balcones Award, as well as a Pushcart Award in residencies at Yale, McDowell, the Foundation Valparaiso, and Villay Colony of the Arts. Publications include poetry in the American Poetry Review, Poetry, the Green Mountain Review, Hotel America, Sinister Wisdom, the Kenyon Review, Hayden's Ferry, the Massachusetts Review, the Los Angeles Review, Poet Lore, River Styx, and the Anthology of Contemporary Vermont Poetry, Roads Taken. For more information, you can go to cwpotterverse.com. So welcome, Karen.
Very much for inviting me. It's so lovely to be in this space. So feel so isolated as not being down here with me. Speak more in. I'm there? Yeah. Yeah, so thanks for being here. I just start with home called Thanks for the Coke, and preface this with after my parents died, my mother actually was still alive when this farm was sold. The farm was, my brother sold the farm, and some people bought their house they grew up in and redid it in the ways in which it were quite amazing, including a new pool that my mother would have loved dearly. So my girls and I snuck in there in the one night when those people were gone, very, very rich, coming back and forth to New York. And we had a little new swim, so this is bad. And the poem begins, the swim's in July. My mother had died in the January previous to that, so that's why there's snow at the end of the poem. Thanks for the Coke. I was looking for you, and I took a swim in your pool. It wasn't your pool. You never had a pool. It's the house I grew up in. The pool is new. The people are new. It was a hot night in July. No one was home. I opened the gate, took off my clothes, dove in, swam end to end. Thanks for the beer you left poolside. Thanks for the Coke. Barn across the road is broken, and the cows wandering some road no one ever figured out. Is that north? South? What next, someone might ask. I was looking for you, and I go on looking. That kitchen, those windows, how does any one person be that much gone? There it is, the full moon, so cold tonight, it's like the moon is a hole in the sky through which all heat goes. And the light on the snow, you could read by it. You could walk on it, which apparently you did. The crust on top must have held you up. Must have made it possible to go where you went. In daylight, I'll look for tracks to see what came through while I slept, where anything went. The next poem I'm going to read is a slightly different tone. Stealth. I lived out in Indiana for a little bit. And the cicadas were out, which is really quite amusing to see. But this was about a relationship that went to Indiana. Stealth, or a sweet bit of stealing. She said she loved me. She was an ink stole, girl stole between her legs. Her breasts stole me, her mouth had me. She and I stole from each other. We drove to another state, and the state stole from us. Jesus stole something. There were signs along the roadway. Jesus saves. We were stealing ourselves quietly by ourselves, and no one could see. There were cicadas stealing the silence from the air, stealing our words, cracking them together between their legs. We were stealing the state we got stolen from. There were bees in the apples stealing sweet meat from the trees. There were apples on the ground stealing dirt from the earth. There were stealers stealing around us singing their bird songs. There was a flood and a stealing, stinging bee sting. She stung me. I loved her. She stole and I stole from her. She loved me. It was a sweet bit of stealing, a nickel, a dime, a few years, some bird song. This one of the sections of this book are prose poems in Abecedarian form, and each one on a different animal. This one is called It Seemed Plausible, and it is about early learning. It seemed plausible. Seemed plausible, just like everything else did back then. The giant ape climbing the Empire State Building, the blonde in his hand. I was screaming, wriggling, the blonde in his hand, screaming, wriggling. The plan seemed straight on. I was a girl and I was blonde, and there was that to look forward to. Getting grabbed around the waist and carried to the top of the building, which led to the screaming my friend and I did in the haymow above my father's cows. Just practicing, we said, after kissing and touching each other's breasts, and then the screaming. I was never impressed by my own scream. It seemed to fall short, not as good as Sandra's. Down in the barn below, the cows never stirred. Nobody could hear us up there in the mow. All those bales stacked around us, field after field of tall grasses and small birds, and whatever got caught in the balers stacked neatly to the ceiling. If you put bales away damp, they'll heat up, burst into flame. No matches, no smokes. If you put your hand in there, you could feel the heat. We were careful about it. But maybe that was not just a myth. But maybe that was just a myth. Barns catching themselves on fire, point of origin unknown. The next one it's called When My Mother and I. It's about shopping for clothes and feeling very queer. My mother was quite the lady, and she wanted everybody to be quite the lady with her. When my mother and I went shopping for clothes, I may as well have had yellow jackets under my skin, the stinging kind, the kind that made you fat and queer. Something buzzing in me that didn't work for her, something in her that didn't like what she saw. It's like when you're picnicking in a warm fall day, you get swarmed by yellow jackets. There they'd be on the apples, on the rims of the glasses, in the cakes, and on your mouth. Everything you picked up to put in your mouth had something buzzing on top of it. We were like that, she and I. Watch what you eat, she'd say. You have to admire them, their tenacity. Meat bees, they're erroneously called as they do not eat meat. You might hope you could train them, seeing as they form columns and organize nests, but try as I might, they flew off in multiple directions. When I think of her now, I feel some movement beneath my skin, modeled as it is at this point. Perhaps it's that ringing in my ears, the yellow jackets in their best yellows, racing colors, as they say, of the track, but we're not at the track. I do miss her nonetheless, no matter what I tell you next. This film, is a love poem of sorts. It varies a lot to the snow stacked out all over the place, crushing that, started pushing against the house. Oh, to blundering. I want to think that the two downy woodpeckers pecking the lichen on the beloved but partly ruined apple tree outside my window are helping the tree. As I like to think, the snow banked up solid 4 feet tall against the back door is somehow good for the house. All that weight leaning on it and the snow expanding, contracting, helping it stand too in the wind. Just as I like to think, the mistakes I've made have somehow given me extra points, as in coupons and mileage and free gifts I could use later when push comes to shove, and I especially like to think there should be an age limit on our stupidity, our willingness to believe, the voices whispering in our ears, love, love me do you, sweet something, etc. But even Lear was duped, and Hamlet Sr. fell asleep in the garden with his ear pointing up to the sky, his jealous brother lurking behind the screen with that vial of poison trembling in his hand. You want to shout at those old men, shake them by their white heads like they were fat puppies, smack them awake. All of us older and none the wiser, gray-bearded, spindly-headed, spotted, palsy, hands held out in front of us. What else to do but get on with it? Blunder, then blunder some more. Me more, she whispered, and there I went. And the sixth poem is Fires in Pioneer Town. I lived out in the desert in California for a while, and could see a long way. You could see fires from a long way away. I get all my comfort from nature, she said, and there was nothing anyone could tell her. I wanted to hold her, I wanted her to hold me, but she was obdurate, as in refusing to change one's course of action, as in mulish, pig-headed, inflexible. When I see palm fronds glittering in the sky, I'm reminded how we loved each other, the touch of her skin on mine, her hand entering my body. But when we broke hard like the neighbors across the valley, fleeing the fires. Unable to save their animals, they left everything behind. Nothing but cellar halls, chimneys, metal posts remained. 3 nights the fires burned, flames igniting the pines one by one. Sometimes I remember this in my body, grateful as I am to it for taking me this far, for how desire links one place to another, with skin and tongue and hand of it. Every time I think of her, I wish all of us well, what we break, what we can't fix. And back to Walking the Ice. Another poem. Tracks, Walking the Ice. Tracks of animals that went walking on the frozen river today, light enough to stand anywhere, to walk one frozen block at a time, water banging along beneath, ready to take whatever weighs too much, the river, not a river. You might be able to step across it one chunk to another. I hold my breath as the dog follows the scent into the center, no telling where there might be a gap covered by this dust of new snow. And I think of Barbara, who rode ice floes on the Connecticut as a child, leaping one to another, who leapt inside out, who died of a brain tumor just downriver from Vernon, who never paid taxes, who rode under that wire, who died at 33, who made love to me in that cabin in Wendell, no water, no electricity, no phone, the weed, we smoked, the Jameson, the wood stove burning, who vowed she would not die in the hospital, would take herself out into the woods and end it, but she held on to this thing we cling to, ragged as it gets, rapturous today, the sunlight, a new snow. The last is just from an earlier book. And it's essentially a farm home. As a farm kid, and still like, you know, I like to tell people who've never been on a farm what kinds of strange things about the farm. Herding the chickens. I think I thought if I could convince you that out in the country in 1958, it was common practice to climb up on the backs of horses and drive our flocks of chickens into the upper pasture in order for the chickens to clean their beaks and shake the dust out of their feathers. I thought if I could convince you that each of those 200 chickens wore a bell around her neck, and that our cows had silver halters, and the milk went in a white river straight from their udders into the cups of grateful school children. I think I thought if I could convince you of this, we would both be convinced. No problem, nothing to worry about. But the truth was, I couldn't sleep that night. The first night in your bed. At 4 a.m., I could hear a woman down on the street calling to someone, please, please don't leave me. You were asleep. I could hear the car idling on the street. I lay beside you, looking at the lights coming through your lace curtains. I wanted to pull you toward me, wanted to ease my body around yours, but I stayed still, wishing I could fall asleep. The woman on the street crying called out twice, 3 times, then someone yelled, get out of here, or we're calling the police. It was raining, the wet leaves flattening on the New Haven streets, and I felt like I was in some brand new country, the way the sky stayed lit all night long and you lying beside me. The next morning, I told you about driving the chickens to the upper pasture, and we both laughed because at that moment it looked easy. I didn't tell you I couldn't sleep. Didn't tell you about the woman crying or the car idling 3 stories down or the rain falling all night. When you think of me, I want you to see me. Sitting tall on the back of a tremendous dark horse, how easy I ride that horse, while my brothers and I laughing herd 200 chickens into the upper pasture. I want you to look up and see the white chickens clucking through an acre of green, 400 white wings glinting in sunlight, the chickens dignified, the children magnificent. Thank you.
They went with you.
Ah.
Thanks. Now, Laura Foley will read for us. She's the author of 8 poetry collections. Her most recent is Everything We Need, Poems from El Camino. Her poems have won numerous awards and national recognition. Read frequently on the Writer's Almanac, appearing with Ted Koozer's American Life in Poetry. Her poems have won many awards and have been published in the Alaska Quarterly Review, Valparaiso Poetry Society, London, and many others. In anthologies such as Poetry for Her Presence, an anthology of mindfulness poems, Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection, and How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. Laura lives with her wife, Claire Jimenez, and their walking canines among the hills of Pomfret, Vermont.
Thank you, and thank you, Linda, for creating this event. It's so nice to meet people in person. Been so long. I'm going to start with a poem from Everything We Need, poems from El Camino. Clara and I walked the Camino twice, which is 500 miles the first time in northern Spain, the second time on the Portuguese Camino, which goes up through the coast of Portugal, both times ending in Santiago. Mermaids. The agile octopus hunter passes as we rest on slippery, wet rocks, his long pronged fork just right to find and net Presa viva, she explains, in Cazador de Pulpos, her Spanish tongue lisping her Z's, rolling her R's the way I love this woman, whose voice when I first heard meant one day, surely we go someplace exotic to New England, Honduras, Venezuela, or, as it turns out, sitting on mossy stones in Galicia, 300 miles into our non-faith-based trek to a holy Catholic site, our gay wedding a year in the past, as she explains how you never stab an octopus because the ink, as the black-clad, nimble sea god brandishes his trident in scampering past, letting us mermaids be. I'm going to read two poems from Why I Never Finished My Dissertation. This poem I thought I'd read because it's, we just had the Day of the Dead a couple of days ago, and so it's kind of in the air. What the dead miss. This morning, I think I see in the light dimpling the river's emerald green beneath me, the faces of my dead husband, parents, and younger sister. Feel their fingers in the fresh breeze on my cheeks as I breathe the diesel smell of passing trucks, reminding me of my need to refuel. As I hold the nozzle in place, I watch clouds scurry and reform like roving ghostly crowds. I hear music in the liquid trickling, filling my tank to the brim. Music in my steady footsteps, tapping percussion on the pavement, the car door closing, click. They say that's what the dead miss most, an ordinary day spent like this. So the dogs often figure in the poems, and here's one of them. What stillness. Lily pads ripple in summer breeze as if they bloomed for me. Revelation white clouds float through a divine blue sky. No human voices break the stillness of this hilltop pond, where I come to forget the foolishness of Homo sapiens, where a trout leaps from the lake, splashes, shining down, opening a glimpse into the world below the surface. My dog, wet from her swim between the visible and hidden, shakes dots of sparkling light from her dark coat, forming a watery aura. What sunlight does to water, stillness does to us. So a year ago, almost to the day, I found out that my sister, who I had not seen in many decades, had died. And I'm going to read 3 poems that I've written about that experience of her death. A gated community. She loved the security of the guard and a gate lifting for her car, keeping her safe, until the night she immersed in a hot bath and her heart seized. She sank down, drowned, the water still running in the taps, water overflowing the tub, seeping under the door, soaking the rug, deepening for 2 weeks, until it leapt through the neighbor's wall, which is how I received a call. Then came the police, breaking the locked door of her life, and finding she'd escaped to a place where she'll always feel safe. My sister, who loved real estate, at peace beyond the gates. So I'm her next of kin. I had to deal with a lot of things. She was in Houston, Texas. And one of the things we had to do, I had to deal with, was repairing the house, which had been flooded. And I'm in Vermont. I'm dealing with repairmen on the phone. Now the repairman, my voice across, oh, this is one more thing. sorry, this poem is a kind of experimental poem, so you'll see it's a little different. Now the repairman. My voice across the wires pierces the repairman's ears in Texas. This was my sister, ears in Texas. Blood you left a month after her passing, ears in Texas. Remembering her firstborn 9 years to my lastborn 4. Look at those bloody hands. Her paranoia saw pointing to the faucet. So I wouldn't get in the bath with her? No, Macbeth, my sister's blood was her own, tub her own, though my lawyer assures no fault in her dying blood. Her neighbors have no right to sue. An act of God. How God or faucets act, running water, flooding both townhouses. God or Claire's mischief, the repairman sends scrubbed tub photos so I can stop shouting through her laughter. Now the repairman, now the repair, my cold, empty tub holding me like the sister I've missed since childhood. My voice wires the repairman's ears in Texas. My sister, ears, Texas, blood you left after her passing. Texas, remember her 9 years. Look at those bloody hands pointing to the faucet. So I wouldn't, Macbeth, my sister's blood, tub her own. No fault in dying. Go sue an act of God or faucets, flooding townhouses. God's mischief, the repairman sent scrubbed tub photos, shouting through her laughter, repair my cold tub holding me like the sister I've missed. My sister, ears, Texas, left after her passing, bloody hands, pointing to her dying blood, an act of God, holding me like the sister I've missed. My sister left after her passing, blood, her tub flooding, the sister I've missed. My sister, blood I miss, my sister. I'll read one more on that. The part of this was, dealing with financial matters, which is such an interesting contrast, having so much passion and yet, you do deal with paperwork. Little darts in the Winooski Bank. A wispy-haired woman in pink flowered dress, matching pink purse, forgets why she's there, explains her memory loss, asks the teller to withdraw $30 from savings, then forgets how much she's asked for. As the teller nods, smiles, reminds, I've driven 2 hours to this branch to close my late sister's account. I carry her dark blue checkbook, handwriting neat and legible, small numbers adding up, subtracting. All I have of her, all she left behind in 2 manila envelopes. When she died in her bathtub, her new townhouse was almost empty furniture. She must have known she wouldn't be hosting anyone, must have enjoyed the feeling of owning so much private space. At my turn in line, the bank manager, the assistant, the teller, each shake my hand, look into my eyes. I'm so very sorry for your loss. I wonder if they see my old grief for a sister lost to me long before she passed, snow cold and distant as Pluto's furthest moon. That night, I watched from a lawn chair those little darts of light, just like us, it occurs to me, streaking and falling across a great darkness. So now Clara and I have a van, a camper van. And this summer, this is new to us, and we're very excited. And we went all over Canada, summer and fall. We went to Nova Scotia. So I'm going to read 3 from that series. And I think that the first one I'm going to read is difficult to read because the native language I'm using, but I'll do my best. But the point is the sound of the native language. Nea Shinnig Ming ringing. Nea Shinnig Ming, spoken like bells, ringing for the grace of the point's light and cormorants diving. Chipaway, Ojibwe, the originals of splashing water. Echoes of laughter have been the wind, clear, saltless seas on the lake, and unceded First Nations cape that played on the ancient limestone bluffs, frowns what was and might have been cold, deep water. How water lapping on the stone and water, itchy gumming water, surface if possible. The shadow of the town of seagulls against closed eyelids, gulls thin, insistent fry, pebbled shore of old growth pines. How this world enters all of us in this summer wind, this nibbin no nib, proper neashinin ming, a point of land portage, a point of oneness that might have been, and yet maybe in Nawash in harmony. In one of our campsites, we encountered mosquitoes. The mosquitoes of Tatamagouche. At a seaside campsite in afternoon heat, swarms of mosquitoes follow us inside our van. As we slam screens down, still stuck with dozens biting, necks, arms, ankles, through thick socks and the dog's fur. Though we massacre them one by one, my wife, wearied by difficult family news and driving strange highways, sequestering with me in the draining onslaught, hisses something she remembers I said months ago, and I bend my shoulder away, stare out the window as shadows lengthen in the grassy field, as the sting of our angers dissipates, as we revise our plan, rev the van, and flee the mosquitoes of Tatamagouche. Cycles. Visiting the famous Bay of Fundy. My favorite thing is the laundry. On a hot sunny day, nothing else we have to do but wait for the next cycle. We count, stack loonies to slip into slots, to churn our clothes while napping, free of bird or queen dreams in our comfy camper van, harbored in the almost empty parking lot. After folding shirts and pants, we walk across a mile of red mud, under pink sky, among scurrying crabs, shells, and salty puddles, covered just this morning by deep tidal water. Soon to be drowned again, as waves tick off the ages, minute by week by season, as we sleep and wait and add our little ripples to the sea. And I'm going to end in the next poem. Laura has had breast cancer and during COVID and is doing very well. Two halves. So this is from maybe a year and a half ago. Two halves. I sit in the sun in May by a flat of strawberry plants I plan to hoe in to thick mulch and blown as my wife directs. 4 in the garden's heart, 3 against the edges. Dig in deep, water just enough to nourish the roots. Fine as baby or angel hair, their secondary filaments delicate as breath, while gentle the roots into rich soil. Laura's worked for decades as she nurses her post-surgical chest, arms too swollen to use. I limp from a leg injury after walking, months of walking too much, 600 miles since January, hiking daily over steep hills to ease the strain of caretaking until my legs gave out. I plant from a chair as she, the gardener, stands, hands at her sides. We 2 halves, hoping for a whole harvest sometime this summer.
I wanted to tell everybody that Orca was supposed to be here to record it and so I apologize. Hopefully for the next one, they will come, but I called, I didn't get any answer, so I'm not sure what happened.
We are recording on Zoom. So.
Huh?
We are recording on Zoom.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So you're doing it on the computer?
Yes.
Oh, good. See, yeah, so. Great. Next, we're gonna welcome Robin Joy. Her first chapbook, Tumbling Through, was published by Budget Press in 2022, and her poems have been featured in various publications and anthologies. She resides in central Vermont with her husband and their genius cat and hosts a monthly poetry reading series at the Front in Montpelier. She's been sober since 2016 and finds delight in playing in the kitchen, creating surprise rituals, and communing with the natural world. Her poems tell personal stories in the context of nature, addiction, queerness, trauma, and chronic and mental illness. She also regularly shares first drafts that are often deleted at random on Instagram at the comma struggle. Welcome.
Am I in the mic right here? Okay, accurate. This one's called When We Hibernate. Tell me what you see when the wind catches the spider web early in the morning in the cave within the pines where we don't sleep to dream. And if you are still awake, remember what it felt like when the hot sun was heavy on the tops of your ears and when the moon reflected off our faces and we thought we saw ghosts, but they were shadows of our past selves telling us it was okay to let go. I don't think it's true that animals don't keep dream journals in the winter. So I'm crawling inside the belly of the bear to see what it is like to be so still. This one's called Home. I feel like it's something I'm always looking for. I am looking for a mooring called home because anchors shift with friction. No solace in the backyard of my childhood that smells of decaying deer. I am not all right, but maybe I am correct when gray bleeds into a new Pantone square, but it's still gray. I'll write this confessional to no one, leave it in an old mailbox to be lost or discarded. I want to believe that beauty isn't as rare as the corpse lily bloom, because it's an illusion that we cannot claim godliness until the mirror tells us we are good. I don't have a lot of introductions for these, so I feel like I'm just gonna blast them at you. This is called A Thin Slice of Silence. This morning I used yarrow to extract truth from the hovering fog, thick with bird voices. I ran under a murder of ravens, not privy to my own telltale tail feathers, signs of belonging somewhere without being common. I've been staring into the red votive glass on my altar every day, inhaling the satisfying sting of sage, wanting to live there. I wish I could find religion in the flickers and the smoke, crawl inside to see how it works. I wish I could become a minnow in the river, see the bottom where my feet might plant themselves, find roots of an invasive sort where I can wander across and over, always knowing where I started. I wish I could live on the edge without being in it, where my belly can safely be soft and tender. When I was little, it didn't occur to me that water birds had legs. They were magic and floated home without struggle. Every time I see animals, I cry lately, because when we make eye contact, I find redemption. Last night, I saw a deer with caramel fur, and I woke up with dream sand on my fingers. This one's for our friend Fern Feather, who was taken pretty violently from us in the spring. And I've written a few poems, but this one's resonating with me lately. It's called To Fern Feather on Your Birthday. It's Earth Day, and you day, and you are Earth. I didn't know you well, but I knew you well enough to know. I can't swallow the impossible equation of your soft feathers and the sharpness of hate. I can't keep plants alive, and I know that you would know why. But I never asked you, because we mostly just shared hellos within a fervor that I thirsted for. We are all putting fallen feathers on altars to honor you and pledging to save the planet because we couldn't save you. It's your 30th birthday. The sun peeked through and winked today, and I was sure that it was you. This one's called I Can Tell the River Anything. Death is simply a quieting of the intemperance of living. I still remember the sound of the eyeball popping as my brother pried it out of the trout with a pocket knife. And the sound of all the losing hearts as they slapped the ground like wet steaks, liquid suction pulses on linen floors. Last week, a raven sounded like it was screaming from the trees, but when our eyes watched each other, we knew the tether from the rope around my waist had frayed a little more. Every time another loss pounds through my lungs, I start to chew at it, to slip into that tiny crevice between femur and ilium, where I could curl up in the bowl of my pelvis. The weight of this grief is held by the river, and I whisper thank you. I just wrote this one last week. I do a regular workshop with a woman named Desiree who works with button poetry. She's sort of a slam poet, but she facilitates this workshop that I've been doing for several years now since the pandemic, and been lucky enough to stay with it every Friday. So this came out of that last week. It's called An Untitled Fairy Tale. The beans sprouted from their hands when I emerged from fluids and eggs, growing into a stalk I was clinging to until something better emerged from my scalp. And I let down my hair from a top window, but the sting of the feet digging into split ends was too much. And so I grew taller with it, while bees buzzed out rhythms and my hips shook my legs open. And what did I have to say for myself, except that the one that said, "This one makes you small," had never worked the way I wanted. So was it really my fault that the rabbit lived in such an old tree? And when the sky really did feel like it was falling, no one believed me because my wolf had already cried so much it drowned all sympathy. But then the hunters only said they cut out my heart because they were hungry for a chest to pin the shame on. Can I swear? Can I drop an F-bomb? Is that okay? This title's probably longer than the poem, but okay, this one's called Where Being a Self-Involved, Inappropriately Angry, Sexually Fucked Up Asshole, Addict, Friend, Lover, Daughter, and Sister Takes Me. I want that on my head. Head underwater, feet over cliff, car over median, tape over lips, platitudes between my ears, falling through my throat to the sticky chains on my pelvis, pulling fingernails over skin to push pulses into blood, crawling across dog shit lawns to cower in wood piles with earwigs, charging through fire rages and swamp gut sadness, feet torn, pant afraid, lying to avoid explaining, pretending. Golden thread. My knees are stitched together, the knot pulled through my pelvis and around in a golden thread. I am sorting out the places in my timeline where the seams split, stitches pulled open, legs wide and wanting. My lips begging, peach nectar dripping down my chin until someone licked it raw to let me know I was wanted. I live inside myself more often than out loud, and sometimes this is mistaken for loneliness. But I was lonelier when I was noisy, A bell I rang every time I heard the train coming. But now I walk along the sides of the railroad ties, kicking the gravel and letting the rocks scatter. This is called On a Wednesday. It followed a conversation I had on a Wednesday with a very close friend, and we were both struggling. And our part, we've actually never met in person. And just sort of had both been going through this hard time without knowing it. We're both sobbing on the phone to each other, but comforting each other at the same time. And I hung up and wrote this poem for him on a Wednesday. If you stand too close, the heat in your ilium pushes out, singeing the corners of your mouth. Everyone says not to look into the sun, but the slow burn breathes like the thick paper you couldn't set on fire, no matter how many times you held a lighter to it, burning the pad of your index finger because you didn't have a Zippo. But you had a sick fascination with twirling the thread until it wrapped itself around your intestines, blocking off all the voices that told you to feel it, not feed it. But it's so hungry. And when you see tears, you have tears, and then everyone is crying on a Wednesday through all the sterile conversations that mean nothing, that mean everything, that change your blood from red to gray, pumping bellows, pushing the edges, finally igniting it, setting you on fire. The scream that comes out scares even you. Yeah, two more, that went by very quickly. This is called Ace with a small A and on the fray. I knew my instincts were wired wrong when the idea of kissing Patrick in the middle school parking lot gave me my first anxiety attack. Or when Harold showed me what my body could do with his hands the summer after 8th grade, and I was so horrified I broke up with him. Or in high school, when I wouldn't let Aaron take my clothes off, but I wanted to curl into spoons. I learned to flirt and give myself away when it earned me attention, fed my addiction to affection. I gave it away and gave it away and gave it away, wearing the mask of typical, avoidant of direct connection, void of magic when sheets wrapped around torsos, always burying myself inside my pelvis, thrusting with the lights off. I didn't know until the internet told me I'm not broken, even though I am not normal enough or queer enough to take a seat anywhere. I didn't know there was a lexicon of terms under an umbrella hovering over a collection of flags for me to choose from, or how hard it would be for me to wave one. And I have one more. This one's called Oat Milk Latte with a Hint of Gold. When I fell like honey, it was slow and chaotic, not deliberate like a sugar cube delicately dropped and received. My body wound around the spool, dripping down in a thin, ornate twist, and back up, with my torso emerging severed from the rest. I am tired of not knowing how to swim, and my legs will not become a mermaid fin, even if I pretend that they can, because I was not born a fish.
Well, thank you, poets, that was great. And we'll have a short Q&A if anybody has any questions of the poets that they would like to ask. So feel free, now's your chance.
Pass the mic.
If you pass the mic, that, but we'll have to wipe it off in between, that's the only.
Yeah, I know, just sort of.
Yes, I'm here now. I'll ask what it is.
Well, okay, I'll ask you and then you can repeat it, and I'll ask you, who were your poetic influences?
Who are your poetic influences?
Linda will repeat your answer.
Who wants to start?
I can try and name a few.
You what?
I can name some. We just shout out some names.
Yeah.
We could pass this around.
Yeah.
I mean, no? Okay.
Does that more whites?
Alrighty,
Read them.
read them. Okay.
You wanna go?
Any other questions?
Influences first.
Huh?
Go with this first.
Influences first? No? Are we
Yeah.
still doing that one?
Yeah, come out.
Yeah, okay. So does anybody have? And what did you say, Troy?
I didn't say anything now.
We haven't had one yet.
It's a hard question. I don't know why I said I would go first. I would say, I think Patti Smith, for sure, a musician named Kristen Hirsch, Desiree Del Giacomo, who could be on Zoom right now, who knows? So many poets that I've met through that workshop and through just being online. Andrea Gibson, Jeffrey Daniel. And a lot of other people, who knows, it's a huge universe of poets.
I know.
Does anybody, do you have some?
Dan likes this question.
I love
because
this
it stumps everyone. Then they're all like. Yeah.
I knew this was coming because I heard last. Well, the only ones I can think of right now are Pablo Neruda. I love his love poetry. And William Carlos Williams. There's no one to like me, but I don't know.
Well, I can say it's like trying to identify the molecule of air. That is, there's so many influences over the years and over my whole course of, from my life, first reading, songs. And then reading Sylvia Plath and finding Sylvia Plath and totally charged up by Sylvia Plath's work and Florence Ferlinghetti and goes on from there. And then, Adam and Rich and James Tate, they would never be together, you know what I mean? It's like very different than Charles Semick and Ruth Stone. She's a, local, she's a Vermont poet. Was a Vermont poet, so it's just yeah, huge, just a huge question. I don't think this is on.
Okay, same problem of feeling like it's the air we breathe. My first was Dylan Thomas. In 5th grade, I had a teacher who played Fern Hill on a record player. And his gravelly voice was like, okay, that's what I want to do. But I didn't really start writing until I was 45. So to the left. I did a lot of, I was an academic in poetry, so I wrote a master's thesis on Wallace Stevens. T.S. Eliot was huge for me as a younger person. And then, that was what I said when my children were little. I used to recite poetry to them that like Eliot, like proofread, because that's all I had to do. For Louise Glick, just won the Nobel Prize. She was a Vermont Poet Laureate, and I was won the Nobel Prize. Mary Oliver, who I was lucky enough to I had lunch with her one time. And I have so many friends who are poets and whose work I also admire. Barbara Crooker comes to mind. James Cruz, who has done all these anthologies, and he's collected a lot of poems that are very accessible and is finding a big audience. So that's a whole other kind of subject. Mindfulness poems. So.
Thank you.
I think it all depends on like how old you are. Like in 8th grade, I loved Dickens, Dickinson. And then Plath, and then coming out with Adrian Rich and Audre Lorde, and all those people that were really huge influences. And I think your style or whatever kind of changes over time, even though those people stay with you. So, any other questions?
You started to answer one of the questions I have, which is, when did you start writing?
When you went,
When did you start writing?
oh, when did you start writing?
I started writing pretty early and, I sent to the New Yorker, the Atlantic Monthly, a handwritten poem about a bear. And that's, I don't know how old I was. And then really, that was it. So it's been ongoing.
I did write a poem about my cat in kindergarten, but then I stopped and I didn't write again until I was 45 and I remember, the first poem that I wrote, then. And, I mean, that was about, well, that's 20 years ago. I now have, 8 books, 2 more coming really soon. So, it was kind of like this, like big explosion, of finding, instead of being an academic, being a person who writes. It's so much more fun to write.
Yeah, I think I probably wrote some terrible haiku or poems in childhood. Some very dramatic short stories as an adolescent. I remember some, I think I still have some of those, I hope. But I didn't really start writing as I write now. Till very recently. I'm 45 now, so I relate to that. I've been working with Gary. Oh my God, I'm spacing his last name right now, for Writers for Recovery, in town, and meeting with him regularly for several years, and that started me back on writing. And then started working with Desiree, and during the pandemic really is what really got me going. So that was it been 3 years now? So I guess I've been seriously writing for 3 years because I had that space to be able to do it when I wasn't able to work. I was privileged, definitely, in how it worked out for me. So I'm happy for that. And now here I am. Doing what I'm doing.
Well, years ago when my mother died, I was looking through some papers and discovered this little book called Poems About the Sea that I'd made for my father for Father's Day. And I started looking through it and I said, wow, I didn't even remember that I'd been writing poetry. I must have been 8 years old or something. And then, you know, through high school I didn't, but in college when I started journaling again, is when I started writing poetry again.
Anybody? Okay, well, you got a question? No, okay. So, thank you, poets. It was a great evening, and, see you later.
See you later.
Oh, there's books up there if anybody is interested,
Refreshments?
refreshments,
Can you back?
following candy and cookies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.